Hi, we're not on the range today, we're at one of our training facilities, so you may have to bear with a great deal of noise in the background, but hopefully none of it will be gunfire. And fair warning, all I'm going to do today is talk. Now recently I've gotten a lot of questions and commentary, and this seems like a good time to deal with some of them. One of those questions is about why I don't do ballistics gel testing. And there's been some creative ways to ask it and some creative adjectives used to describe me while asking it. Well, that notwithstanding, the answer is good science is verifiable, falsifiable, and repeatable. So in the world of firearms-related video presentations, when you see 10 people doing the exact same ballistics gel test, that's not necessarily derivative, it's good science. But since there's about 100 people doing ballistics gel test, I don't think it's constructive to make that number 101. Also, in my opinion, good science does not necessarily mean doing the exact same test, but doing different tests, hence some of the things we do. Besides that, wouldn't it be boring if we all did the exact same thing? Which brings me to the topic I really want to talk about, and that's somebody who calls himself the Yankee Marshal. Recently, he did a presentation where he mentioned me. Oh, and side note, for those of you who have an IQ that's down there around room temperature, in an igloo, his presentation was not intended to insult me, it was just for humor. But to get back on task, it did get him a lot of criticism about all he does is lecture and political commentary and laudanum-fueled rants, as where I do things like testing and demonstration. That's actually a good thing that he does that, because it would be boring if we all did the same thing, and I have no desire to do lecture or deal with the political aspects of firearms ownership, things that he embraces and is really good at. Not only that, he can inject humor into things. If I tried to do a political commentary presentation and put some humor into it, it might look something like this. Hi, most people who own firearms use them in a very safe and ethical manner, but there is a very small number of people who use firearms unsafely, unethically, sometimes with obvious evil intent. And when that happens, you always see the cry for background checks, as if we don't already have them, and licensure and restriction and so on. Well, recently there was something in the news about someone who drove a car onto a Little League baseball field, killing one of the adults that was there. And when I was done asking, was it an assault car, it got me to thinking about restrictions on cars. We have people driving them everywhere completely indiscriminately. I think cars should be required to have a serial number just like guns have, except it wouldn't be called a serial number. And I say cars generically, I mean all motor vehicles. And you'd probably call it a vehicle identification number or something like that. And then there should be a governmental agency whose job it is to keep track of all those identification numbers, so that you could look up that number and see who owns that. And then the reciprocal look up a name and see what cars they own. Not only that, we have people driving without any kind of restraint or without any kind of training. There should be some kind of mandatory education, or if not training, at least some kind of government-regulated testing process where people would have to show a level of competency before they're allowed to drive a car. And that same motor vehicles department could issue licenses to drive. If you did that, tragedies like that Little League ball field thing could be prevented, and things like drunk driving would be a thing of the past. If someone drove drunk, you'd just revoke their license to drive. If we had such a system, our streets would be safer, our police would be more efficient, it would be... What? There is. Never mind. And scene. Now see, if I did that, it would just be stupid. If Yankee Marshal were to do something like that, and he may already have, it would get the point across, and it would be funny. Not only that, if I were to do that, it requires me to talk for several straight minutes. If he were to do it, he's perfectly okay with doing fade edits, so he only has to string a couple sentences together at any one time. And for you, the viewer, you would get a better product because he's better at it than I am. He's better at political commentary, and he's better at humor. Now, speaking of humor, there's another person I want to discuss, and that's someone from an organization called 182nd Ideas. No, not 182nd, 182nd ideas. And he calls himself Gun Drama Johnny. And he deals with what he considers to be the lighter side and the humorous side of firearms-related video presentations. And he's mentioned me a couple of times, and some people have asked me for my response to that. Well, my only response to that would be I find his content wrought with humor. Some of my colleagues do not agree with me. He has a tendency to do these cutaways to pop culture references, which some of my colleagues find tedious. In fact, one of them wants to address Johnny directly about that. Sheila?
Why, John, you old stick in the mud. I've been listening to that horse shit of yours for months, and you can take that crap and blow it out your ass. And for good measure, sit on this, John.
Now, if I were going to offer Johnny any constructive criticism, it would be that because I'm a cosmopolitan sophisticate, I make very highbrow choices in terms of firearms-related fashion, and he might want to reevaluate his wardrobe. Also, the ongoing thing about which one might fit my hand better has caused some bickering among a couple of my colleagues, even though, of course, I do not have any favorites. So as always, don't try this at home. If you do, you may end up with someone launching a single-handed hate campaign against you. And thanks for watching.